The most feared man in Seoul came to claim the family's golden daughter and walked past her to choose the plus-size sister they treated like a servant, the one who had once saved his life without ever knowing his name. The champagne glass shattered on the marble, and no one moved to clean it. 200 guests at the Cole family's grand engagement gala had just watched the most feared man in Seoul do the one thing no one in that ballroom had believed possible. He had looked at Grace Cole, the golden daughter, radiant in a gown that cost more than most people's cars, groomed her entire life for exactly this moment, and he had walked straight past her, past the woman every man in the room wanted, past the daughter her family had spent 20 years polishing like a trophy, and he stopped in front of the other one, the one in the apron, the one carrying a tray, the one they kept in the kitchen and called the fat one when they thought she couldn't hear. Imani Cole froze, a tray of glasses trembling in her hands as Kang Tae-min, the man who owned half the city and feared nothing, looked at her the way no one had looked at her in her entire life. "I came here for a daughter of this house," he said, and his quiet voice carried to the last corner of the silent room. He did not look away from Imani. "I'll take that one." Grace Cole's beautiful face went white, and Imani, invisible, overlooked, unchosen Imani, looked into the eyes of the most dangerous man in Seoul and felt the floor drop out from under her. Because she knew that face, she had seen it once before. Months ago. On a rainy night when a bleeding stranger had collapsed at the back door of the kitchen where she worked, and everyone else had run. And she had stayed. She had saved his life. She had never learned his name, and she had told herself she would never see him again. There are two kinds of women the world builds, the ones it puts on display and the ones it puts to work. Imani had spent her whole life being the second kind. The most dangerous man in Seoul had just walked into her family's ballroom, and in front of everyone who had ever overlooked her, chosen her anyway. Why would the most feared man in the city humiliate a powerful family to claim the daughter they treated like a servant? And what had a bleeding stranger seen on a rainy night months ago that no one in Imani's whole life had ever bothered to look for? Stay with me. Because the girl they kept in the kitchen is about to become the most powerful woman in Seoul, and the family that spent 20 years breaking her is about to learn exactly what they threw away. Imani Cole had been invisible for so long she had almost stopped minding. Almost. She was the one who woke at 4 to prep a kitchen for a household that never thanked her. She was the one who knew where every one of the family's money went, because she was the one who moved it. She was the one they called when the caterer quit, when the accounts didn't balance, when something needed fixing quietly before the neighbors could see. And she was the one they seated in the back, at holidays if they remembered to seat her at all. The Cole family had 2 daughters. Everyone in their circle knew only one. Grace was the golden one, beautiful, polished, presented to the world like a jewel her parents had spent 20 years cutting. And Imani was the other one, the soft one, the large one, the one her mother introduced on the rare occasions she introduced her at all. As my Imani, she's so good with the house. Not my beautiful daughter, not my clever daughter, though God knew Imani was twice as clever as anyone in that family. Good with the house, a tool, a convenience with a pulse. Imani had learned long ago not to cry about it. Crying changed nothing, and it ruined your eyes for the work. So instead she made herself useful, and she made herself quiet, and she built a small warm world inside her own head, where her worth was not measured by a dress size or a mirror. She did not know that morning, as she rolled dough for a party meant to celebrate her sister, that a man she had once saved on a rainy night was about to walk into her life and burn the whole invisible arrangement to the ground. The gala had one purpose, and it was not subtle. For months, the Cole family had been circling the most dangerous opportunity of their lives. Kang Tae-min, the man who owned half of Seoul and answered to no one, was looking to bind himself to a family, for reasons the Coles didn't understand and didn't care to. An alliance with a man like that could lift them out of the merely wealthy and into the untouchable. And the Coles had exactly one thing worth offering him: Grace. They had groomed her for it the way you groom a racehorse. The lessons, the languages, the gowns flown in from 3 countries. 20 years of every resource the family had, poured into one beautiful, ruthless daughter, sharpened to a single purpose: to walk into a room and make a dangerous man decide he wanted her. Tonight was the night. 200 guests, a ballroom dripping with gold, and Grace at the center of it, radiant, certain, already rehearsing the small triumphant smiles she would give when the most feared man in the city crossed the room to claim her. Imani was in the kitchen, plating canapes. That was where she belonged, her mother had made very clear. "Stay out of sight tonight, Imani. This is Grace's night." A delicate pause, a glance up and down. "Try not to draw attention." Imani had nodded and tied her apron and gone to work. She was good at being out of sight. She had a lifetime of practice. She had no idea that the man the whole family was holding its breath for had come to that gala for one reason only. And it was not Grace. 4 months earlier, on a night when the rain came down like the sky had given up, a man had nearly died at the back door of the restaurant where Imani used to pick up weekend shifts. She heard him before she saw him, a heavy, wrong sound against the door, in the alley where the deliveries came. The other staff heard it too. And the other staff, being sensible people who lived in a city where the wrong kind of trouble got you killed for witnessing it, turned off the lights and pretended they hadn't. Imani opened the door. He was slumped against the wall, soaked through, one hand pressed to a wound in his side that was losing its argument with the rain. Dangerous, even half dead, she could see it on him, the way you see a storm coming. Everything sensible in her said, close the door. Everything her family had ever taught her said, this is not your problem. You are not important enough to survive being involved. She knelt down in the rain beside him anyway. She got him inside. She cleaned the wound with hands that didn't shake, because Imani's hands never shook when someone needed them. She stitched it with a boiled needle the way her grandmother had taught her a lifetime ago. She gave him water, and then broth, and she sat with him through the worst of the night, and never once asked who he was, or who had done this, or what it might cost her to know. She just stayed. And near dawn, when he was stable and sleeping, she went to boil more water, and when she came back, he was gone. No name, no note. Nothing but a folded stack of money she never touched, and a strange certainty, deep in her chest, that she had just done something that mattered. She told no one, and she told herself she would never see him again. She was wrong. Which brings us back to the ballroom, and the shattered glass, and 200 people who had forgotten how to breathe. I'll take that one. The words hung in the gold-lit air like something that could not be unsaid. For one full second, the Cole family's carefully built world simply stopped. Grace stood frozen in her flawless gown, her rehearsed, triumphant smile still half-formed, the mother's champagne flute tilted, forgotten, dripping onto the marble. The father made a small, strangled sound, and Imani stood in the doorway to the kitchen, in her flour-dusted apron, holding a tray she'd forgotten she was holding, certain, absolutely certain, that she had misheard. "I'm sorry," her mother said, recovering first, her voice pitched to laugh the whole thing off. I think there's a misunderstanding. That's the help. That's Imani. Grace is right here, Mr. Kang. I know who she is." Kang Tae-min did not raise his voice. He turned his cold, dark eyes on the mother, and the woman's practiced smile died on her lips. "I know exactly who she is. The question is why you don't." He crossed the ballroom. 200 of Seoul's most powerful people parted in front of him like water. He walked past the golden daughter without so much as a glance, and he stopped in front of the woman in the apron. And the whole glittering room turned at last to look at the one person. In it they had spent a lifetime refusing to see. Imani had wanted her entire life to be seen. She had never once imagined it would feel this terrifying. The father found his voice first, because a man who has spent 20 years building something will always, in the end, try to protect the investment. "Mr. Kang," he said, stepping forward, his smile stretched thin, "we are honored, truly. But the alliance we discussed, it was always understood to be with Grace. Grace is prepared for this, educated for it. Imani wouldn't know how to." "I did not ask for your most prepared daughter," Kang Tae-min said. "I asked for that one. She is not," the mother started. "Choose your next word very carefully." He did not look at the mother. He was still looking at Imani. But the temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees, and the mother's mouth closed. "The next word you use to describe her. Choose it very carefully. Because whatever you call her tonight is what the most powerful family in Seoul will call her by morning. And you do not want to be remembered as the woman who insulted my wife in front of me." The word wife landed on the ballroom like a bomb. The Coles could not refuse him. That was the terrible, beautiful arithmetic of it. To say no to Kang Tae-min was to declare war on a man who did not lose wars, in front of every rival and ally they had. They had built their whole lives to be handed to this man. They simply hadn't expected him to choose the daughter they had thrown away. So the father bowed, and the mother bowed, and Grace, white-faced and shaking with something that was not quite grief, bowed too. And Imani Cole, who had been invisible for 27 years, watched her entire family bow because of her. He took her out of that ballroom the way he did everything, without asking and without hurry, one hand at the small of her back, guiding her past 200 staring faces into a car that waited in the rain like it had always been waiting. The moment the door sealed them in silence, Imani found her voice. "I don't know what that was," she said. Her hands were shaking, though her voice somehow was steady. "But you need to take me back inside and fix it. Whatever you think you're doing. I'm not Grace. I'm the one who plates the food and balances the books and stays out of the photographs. You don't want me. Men like you don't want women like me. So either this is a mistake, or a joke, or some move I don't understand, and I have spent my entire life being other people's convenient thing, and I will not be yours." She braced for anger. Men did not like being spoken to that way, and this was the most dangerous man in the city. Kang Tae-min looked at her for a long moment in the dark. "There it is," he said quietly. "There's what?" "The voice. I've been trying to find that voice for 4 months." Something moved behind his cold eyes. Something that on another man she might have called wonder. "You knelt down in the rain for a stranger who could have gotten you killed and asked for nothing, and then you disappeared. And I have turned this entire city upside down looking for the woman who did that." He held her gaze. "You are not a convenient thing, Imani Cole. You are the least convenient thing that has ever happened to me, and I have no intention of letting you go." It took Imani a moment, then 2, and then the whole world rearranged itself. "The rain," she whispered, "the back door. You were bleeding, you could barely." She stared at him, at the sharp jaw, the cold eyes, the scar she hadn't been able to place. 4 months ago that face had been grey and slack with blood loss, and she had held it in her hands and told it to keep breathing. That was you. That was me. You were dying, I was. And every sensible person in that restaurant turned off the lights and let me. His voice was very quiet. "Do you understand how many people in my life would have stepped over my body to get somewhere warmer? And then a woman I had never met opened a door into the rain and knelt down in it and stitched me back together with her own hands and never once asked what it might buy her. Do you know what that is in my world, Imani? It is the only genuinely kind thing anyone has done for me in 20 years. I didn't know who you were," she said. "I know, that is the entire point." The corner of his mouth moved, the ghost of something. "You didn't help the most feared man in Seoul. You didn't help a fortune or a name. You helped a dying stranger in an alley who could do nothing for you at all." He looked at her like she was the only real thing in a city full of gold. "Your family spent 20 years deciding you were worth less than your sister. They were so busy looking at the wrong daughter that they never once noticed they were raising the only person in Seoul I would ever trust." And Imani, who had been told her whole life exactly what she was worth, felt something crack open in her chest that she had kept sealed for a very long time. "Then let me understand," Imani said, wiping at her eyes, furious at herself for the tears. "You could have simply thanked me, paid me, given me money and a nod and gone on with your alliance, married Grace, gotten whatever you came for. Why the theater? Why humiliate my family? Why marry me? Because a debt like the one I owe you cannot be paid with money, and because I have watched your family for 4 months, Imani, since the night you saved me. I found out who you were, and then I found out what they do to you." His jaw tightened. "I know they use you. I know they hide you. I know your mother introduces you as the help. I know your sister was going to marry into my world and leave you exactly where you are. In the kitchen, invisible, running a family that would step over your body the way that restaurant stepped over mine." He leaned forward. "I refuse to accept a daughter they polished for me and leave behind the one who actually has a soul. So I took you, loudly, in front of everyone, because the only way to make the world stop overlooking you, the only way to make it impossible ever again, was to put you somewhere no one on earth would dare look past you." "Beside you," Imani said faintly. "Beside me," he sat back. "And there is a war coming, Imani. There always is in my life. Your family is more tangled in it than they have told you. And you were always going to be caught in the middle of it, protected by no one. Now you are protected by me." A pause. "It is not a cage, it is the safest place in the city, and it happens to be beside the one man alive who already knows exactly what you are worth. His home rose over the Han River in glass and quiet light, and it was full of dangerous men who went still when Imani passed, and stares that the way people always stared at the large woman in the flour-dusted apron the boss had brought home instead of a bride. Imani lifted her chin and let them stare. She had a lifetime of practice, but one person in that vast, cold, beautiful place did not stare. She was small and silver-haired, wrapped in elegant dark hanbok, sitting in the grand front room at midnight, as though she had been waiting up, which, it turned out, she had. She took one long look at Imani, and something in her sharp old eyes softened and warmed and decided. "So," Hermione said, "I'm sorry? The one who saved my grandson in the rain." The old woman rose, crossed the room, and took Imani's flour-dusted hands in her own, without a trace of hesitation, holding them like something precious. 4 months he has been a ghost, searching and not sleeping and not saying why, and now he brings you home, and I see your face, and I understand everything. Her eyes glittered. You did not save a boss. You saved a boy who forgot a long time ago that anyone could ever be kind to him for nothing. Imani's throat closed. "Sit, child," Hermione said, drawing her toward the warmth. "You have been on your feet all night serving people who never once served you. Not here in this house you sit, and someone brings the food to you." She smiled. "Get used to it. You are home now." And Imani Cole, who had spent 27 years carrying the tray, sat down in a warm room in the home of the most dangerous man in Seoul, let someone bring the food to her, and could not for the life of her stop the tears. That same night, back in the emptied ballroom, the Cole family did not lick their wounds. They regrouped. 20 years, the mother hissed, pacing the marble in her ruined gown. 20 years I built this family's future, and that ungrateful girl walks off with it in an apron. She didn't even try. She just stood there and let him. Stop. The father's voice was quiet and cold and not remotely defeated. "You're thinking about it wrong. You think we lost." The mother turned. Grace, silent in the corner, lifted her beautiful head. "We didn't lose," the father said, and a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. "We got something better than a marriage. We got a person on the inside, our person, living in Kang Tae-min's house, sleeping down the hall from the most guarded man in Seoul." He set down his glass. "Do you know what the Yoon family would pay for that? For someone close to Kang who owes us everything. Who we raised, who we can pull any string on we like." Grace's cold eyes began slowly to gleam. "She's soft," Grace said. "She's always been soft. She'll do whatever we tell her, if we frame it right." "She always has." "She always has," the father agreed. And so the family that had spent 27 years teaching Imani Cole that her only value was in what she could do for them decided, in a ruined ballroom at midnight, to use her one final time, to get close enough to the most dangerous man in Seoul to put a knife in his back. Across the river, in a warm room she was still learning to believe was safe, Imani slept. She had no idea the family she had just escaped was already deciding how to spend her. She had no idea the war her husband had warned her about had a face, and it wore her mother's smile. They were married quietly 3 days later. A signature, a witness, no white dress, no 200 guests. Imani wore her own clothes. She'd insisted on that, and on a list of other things, because a woman who had spent her whole life being handed conditions was going to write a few of her own for once. "I want it in writing," she said, sliding her list across the desk. "I'm not a doll you dress up and display. And whatever this is between us, the debt, the gratitude, whatever you're calling it, you don't get to decide it becomes something more just because you signed a paper." His jaw tightened at that last part. "I don't take what isn't offered. I told you that. Then signing costs you nothing." He signed, "And one more thing." Her voice wavered for the first time. "When the war is over, when it's safe, if I want to go, you let me go. No hunting, no debt. I've spent my whole life being kept. I need to know there's a door." Kang Tae-min went very still. "You keep asking me for a door," he said quietly, "because no one has ever given me one." He looked at her a long moment. Then he signed the last condition without a word. But his eyes, when they met hers, held something that was not agreement, something closer to a challenge. "The door is yours," he said. "It has always been yours. But I should tell you now, so it's fair." He set down the pen. "I have never in my life wanted anything to stay as much as I want you to." And Imani, who had braced herself against every kind of cruelty, discovered she had absolutely no defense at all against being wanted. The penthouse should have been the coldest place Imani had ever lived. Instead, slowly, It became the first place that ever felt like it wanted her there. It started with small things, the kind she was trained to notice. Because a woman who's spent her life being overlooked learns to read the language of what people do when they think no one is watching. Food she loved, appearing at breakfast. Food she'd mentioned only once. A chair moved to her window in the exact spot the morning light fell, because she'd said in passing that she's liked to read in the sun. Guards who somehow always knew when she went out and drifted 3 steps behind and never once made her feel watched. And the boss himself, gone before she woke, back long after dark, cold and impossible, who, she slowly realized, left his study light on until he heard her stop moving in her room at night, as though he could not sleep until he knew she was safe. As though a man who feared nothing had found exactly one thing worth staying awake for. One evening she caught him watching her from a doorway, watching her laugh at something Halmione said, her head thrown back, entirely unguarded. And the look on his face was not the look of a man repaying a debt. It was the look of a man who had spent his whole life in the cold, standing outside a lit window, watching the warmth. Imani looked away first. Her heart was doing something dangerous. She had spent 27 years being unwanted. She had built her whole self around surviving it. She had no idea how to survive the opposite. It was the ledgers that gave her away. Kang Tae-min's organization moved more money in a day than the Cole family saw in a year. And one evening, passing his study, Imani glanced at the spreadsheets open on his desk and stopped. "That's wrong," she said, before she could stop herself. He looked up. "Excuse me." That column. The routing through the shipping subsidiary. She stepped closer, frowning, her whole body shifting into the focused stillness her family had exploited for 20 years without ever once respecting it. Someone's skimming. It's small, a fraction of a percent, buried in the freight cost so it looks like fuel variance. But it's not variance, it's the same account every month, for at least a year. Whoever's doing it is patient, and they know your books. The room went very quiet. Kang Tae-min came around the desk, looked at the numbers she was pointing to, and then looked at her, and something changed in his face. "How did you see that?" he said. It was not quite a question. "I've been doing my family's books since I was 16, the real ones and the ones they show people. I found where everyone went, hid what needed hiding, made the numbers tell whatever story they needed told. I'm very good at it." She lifted her chin. "It's just that no one ever thought to say thank you." For a long moment, the most dangerous man in Seoul simply looked at her. This woman his enemies had dismissed, his allies had pitied, her own family had buried in a kitchen, as though seeing something no one else had ever bothered to look for. "My accountants have missed that for a year," he said slowly. "You found it in 30 seconds. I did not marry a woman who needs protecting, did I?" "No," Imani said. "You married one everyone decided not to see." She stopped wearing the apron. It was a small thing, but Halmione noticed everything. One morning, the old woman appeared with 3 seamstresses and a wall of fabric, and informed Imani, in a tone that allowed no argument, that a queen of this house did not dress like she was hiding. "I'm not a queen," Imani said. "You are married to the most feared man in Seoul. You found in 30 seconds what his accountants could not find in a year, and you saved his life in the rain," Halmione said crisply. "You are whatever you decide to be, so decide to be seen." The gown they made her was deep emerald, and it did not hide a single thing about her. It celebrated it, the full curves and the soft shoulders and the warm brown of her skin. And when Imani stepped out in it for the first time, terrified, certain she would look ridiculous, she found her husband waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Kang Tae-min looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, the composure cracked completely, and what was underneath was not pity and not politeness and not a debt. "I have spent my life surrounded by beautiful things," he said, his voice rough. "Bought things, polished things. Women trained since birth to be looked at." He climbed one step toward her. "I have never once seen anything as beautiful as the woman who knelt in the rain for a stranger, and then walked down these stairs like she finally believes she deserves to be looked at." "You don't have to say that," Imani whispered. "I don't say things I don't mean. It's why they're afraid of me." He took her hand. "You are beautiful, Imani, not in spite of anything, not for a woman your size. You are simply, completely beautiful, and I have wanted to say it since a rainy night 4 months ago, and I am done not saying it." And Imani Cole, who had been taught her whole life that beauty was a thing that happened to other women, believed him. Grace came on a Tuesday, all smiles and apology, and Imani's whole body knew it was a trap before her heart was willing to admit it. "I've been horrible," Grace said, tears arriving exactly on cue. "We all have. We treated you like furniture, and I've had 4 months to think about it, and I am so ashamed." She reached for Imani's hand. "You're my sister, I miss you. Can we start again? Can I be the sister I should have been?" Imani wanted it to be true so badly it frightened her. That was the thing about being starved of love your whole life. It made you dangerous to yourself. It made you willing to believe the person who'd spent 27 years stepping on you, if they'd only say sorry with enough tears. Imani knew this about herself. She had always known it, so she did the hardest thing she had ever done. She stayed kind, but she stayed careful. "I'd like that," she said gently. "I really would, Grace. But I've learned something these last few months. When someone shows you who they are for 27 years, and then changes overnight the moment you have something they want, that's not an apology, that's a strategy." Grace's tears stopped very suddenly. For half a second, something cold and ugly and familiar flickered across the golden daughter's beautiful face. The real Grace, the one Imani had grown up with. Then the smile came back. "You've changed," Grace said softly. "Yes," Imani agreed, "I have." And as she watched her sister leave, Imani felt the fear settle cold in her stomach, because she knew that look. She'd spent her whole life on the receiving end of it. Her family wanted something, and they'd just learned that Imani, for the first time in her life, was not going to simply hand it over, which meant they were going to have to take it. The Yoon family's gala was a test, and everyone at it knew it. Kang Tae-min had to appear. A fragile truce required it, and a wife who hid looked like weakness. So Imani went, in a gown the color of wine, on the arm of the most dangerous man in Seoul, into a room full of people who had heard the story and come to watch the boss's plus-size wife embarrass herself. They didn't wait long for the attempt. It was Grace who orchestrated it. A whispered word to a cruel society woman, a loud comment near the bar pitched for the whole room, about how the great Kang Tae-min must have lost a bet, about how some men liked a charity project, about what a man like that could possibly see in a woman like that. The room tittered, waited for Imani's face to crack. It didn't. Imani turned, calm as still water, and in flawless, cutting Korean, the language they'd all assumed the foreigner couldn't speak. She said something so precise and so devastating and so quietly delivered that the cruel woman went grey and the titters died in 200 throats at once. And then a hand settled at the small of Imani's back, and the temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees. Kang Tae-min looked at the assembled cream of Seoul society. "My wife found a theft in my accounts that my people missed for a year. She saved my life with her own hands. She speaks 4 languages. And she is kinder than every person in this room combined." His cold eyes swept them. "You may look at her with respect, or you may leave. But the next person who looks at her with pity will answer to me. And I am not a patient man." No one left, and no one, the rest of that night, looked at Imani Cole with anything but fear and a dawning grudging awe. In the car, Imani was still shaking. "You didn't have to do that, I handled her." "I know you did. You always do. I didn't do it because you needed me to." He looked at her raw and unguarded. "I did it because I could not stand, for 1 more second, to watch a room full of fools fail to see what I see." It happened that night, in the quiet after the storm of the gala. Imani couldn't sleep. She found him on the terrace, jacket off, watching the city, and she came to stand at the rail beside him, and for a while neither spoke. "You keep defending me," she said finally, "in front of everyone, like it costs you nothing. Do you know what that does to a person who's never once been defended in her life?" He turned to look at her. Rain had started, soft and warm, catching in her hair on the wine-dark silk. "Tell me," he said. "It makes them start to hope, and hope is the most dangerous thing you can give someone like me. Because I have survived everything, Tae-min. Everything. Being invisible, being used, being the one no one chooses. I built a whole self out of surviving it." Her voice broke. "The one thing I don't know how to survive is you making me believe it could be different." He reached up slowly and cupped her face in his scarred hand, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek, and the space between them went small and warm and impossible. He leaned in, and then he stopped, a breath away, his forehead against hers, his eyes closed like a man holding back a tide. "If I kiss you," he said, wrecked, "the door I promised you stops being real. Because I will never, as long as I live, be able to let you walk through it." He pulled back, the armor sliding down again. "And you have spent your whole life without a choice. I will not take your last one from you, not even this." He went inside, and Imani stood alone in the warm rain, her heart pounding, and understood with a despair that was almost sweet that the door he kept protecting was the last thing on earth she wanted. Imani did what she always did when her heart was a problem she couldn't solve. She found a different problem, and one had been nagging at her since the night. She found the theft in Tae-min's books. The skimming account, buried in the freight costs. She'd flagged it. Tae-min's people had started pulling the thread, and the thread led somewhere Imani knew far too well. It led to a shell company. And the shell company, when she followed it down through 3 layers of ownership, with the patience she'd spent 20 years learning on her own family's crooked books, led to a name she recognized, her father's. Imani sat very still in front of the screen at 2 in the morning. Her family wasn't just climbing. Her family was in business with someone inside Kang Tae-min's world, had been for over a year, skimming his money, feeding small betrayals, building towards something bigger. The alliance her parents had chased so desperately, the marriage they'd groomed Grace for. It had never been about lifting the coals into the untouchable. It had been about getting inside the fortress. And Imani, the daughter they'd handed over by accident, the one who walked off with the prize in an apron, had just made it infinitely easier for them. She lived here now, she had access. She was, without ever meaning to be, exactly the weapon they had spent 20 years wishing they had. She thought about Grace's tears. "We're proud of you. Can we start again?" Not an apology. A strategy. They didn't want their sister back. They wanted the key she'd become. She kept pulling, because Imani Cole had never once stopped pulling a thread, just because it frightened her. And what she found underneath was worse. The traitor inside Kang Tae-min's organization, the one skimming his money and feeding his secrets, the one Tae-min himself had been hunting for a year, was connected to her father, and her father was connected to the Yoon family. The same Yoon family whose gala they'd just attended. The same Yoon family that had spent a decade waiting for a crack in Kang Tae-min's armor. The picture assembled itself, cold and complete. The Yoon family wanted Kang Tae-min dead and his empire carved open. The traitor inside his walls was their tool, and the Cole family, her family, was the bridge between them, the deniable middlemen who'd fed the operation for a year through her father's accounts. And now the plan had a final piece it had never dared dream of. A Cole on the inside, married to the target, sleeping down the hall. They were going to use her to get to him. She didn't know how yet. A planted document, a poisoned word, a door left unlocked on the right night. But she knew, with the certainty of a woman who'd watched this family operate her whole life, that the plan ran through her. Imani looked at the truth on the screen and felt something she had never once been allowed to feel about her own family. Rage, not the small, swallowed hurt of a lifetime of being overlooked. Real rage. Because they had taken the one good thing that had ever happened to her, the one man who had ever looked at her and seen something worth crossing a city for, and they were going to try to use her to put him in the ground, and they were counting, the way they always had, on Imani being too soft to stop them. She should have gone straight to Tae-min. She almost did, and then her mother called. "Imani, darling." The warmth in her mother's voice was a thing Imani had craved her entire childhood and received maybe twice. "We're having a family dinner, just us. To make things right, your father wants to apologize properly. We all do. Will you come, please? Bring nothing. Just yourself. Just my girl, my girl." 27 years and her mother had never once called her that. And Imani understood in that moment exactly what the dinner was. A trap dressed as love. They wanted her back in the house. To press her, guilt her, hand her some small poison to carry into the fortress, to use her one final time and call it family. The cruelest part was how much of her still wanted to go. How much of the little girl who'd set the table and cleared the plates and waited her whole life to hear my girl still wanted, desperately, to believe it. "I'll think about it," Imani said, and hung up and sat in the dark shaking, because now she knew the truth of it all the way down. Her family had never once loved her. Not for a single day. They had valued her exactly as much as she was useful, and no more. And the moment she'd become useful in a new way, they had simply repriced her. She was not their daughter. She had never been their daughter. She was a tool they had finally figured out how to use, and the part that broke something in Imani that had been holding on by a thread for 27 years was that some small, starved, stupid part of her still loved them anyway. She meant to tell him that night. She really did. But telling him meant saying it out loud. My family is trying to kill you, and they mean to use me to do it. And it meant watching the man who'd chosen her over everyone learn that choosing her had put a knife inside his own walls, and some exhausted, frightened part of Imani could not bear yet to be the thing that hurt him. So she went quiet while she decided what to do, and she pulled away because she couldn't look at him without her face giving everything away. And Tae-min, who read people for a living, who had spent his whole life watching for the moment the people close to him turned, felt her retreat and read it exactly, catastrophically, wrong. "You've gone somewhere," he said, cold and careful that evening, "since the terrace. Since I stopped." His jaw tightened. "I pushed too far, I frightened you. You're remembering the door. That's not. It's all right." But his voice had gone to ice. "I promised you a choice, I meant it. If what you want is distance, you'll have it. I won't touch you again." "Tae-min, I made a mistake," he said quietly. "Thinking a woman I bought out of a ballroom could ever look at me as anything but the latest person to own her." He turned away. "Good night, Imani." It was the cruelest thing he had ever said to her, and she understood, watching his back, that he'd said it to wound himself, not her, that under all that ice was a man so certain he was unlovable that he'd rather believe she was pulling away than believe, for one dangerous second, that she might be pulling away to protect him. They were, both of them, so terrified of being unwanted that they were about to lose each other to it. And across the city, her family lit the fuse. They didn't need Imani to cooperate. That was the thing she hadn't understood until it was too late. She'd been so worried about being asked to betray him that she never considered they'd simply use her without asking. It happened 3 days later. A document surfaced inside Kang Tae-min's organization, a leaked shipping manifest, proof that someone had sold his roots to the Yoon family, and the account it had been leaked from, the fingerprints all over the digital trail, the access logs that placed it beyond any doubt, all of them led to Imani. Her father hadn't needed her to plant anything. He'd needed her access, and she'd been living in the fortress for weeks, and a man who'd spent 20 years cooking his own family's books knew exactly how to make a daughter look guilty of a crime she hadn't committed. Kang Tae-min's men came for her at dawn. Not gently. They had found the traitor they'd hunted for a year, and the traitor was the boss's own wife. The woman he'd humiliated a powerful family to claim, defended in front of all of Seoul, nearly kissed in the rain. The betrayal wrote itself. It was perfect. It was exactly what a man who feared nothing except being made a fool's for love would find easiest to believe. They brought Imani to him in the grey light of morning, and she saw his face and understood that the family who'd thrown her away her whole life had just played their cruelest card of all. They hadn't turned Imani against her husband. They'd turned her husband against Imani. "Tae-min," she said, "it wasn't me. I found the theft. I traced it to them. I was trying to protect you." "Get her out of my sight," Kang Tae-min said, and the coldest man in Seoul could not look at her while he said it. Because if he looked at her, he might believe her, and he had spent his whole life knowing that the moment you believe someone is the moment they destroy you. They put Imani out of the fortress in the grey dawn like something that had spoiled. No coat, no phone, they'd taken it. Just the clothes she wore, the frame around her neck, and the memory of the man who'd promised she was safe, refusing to look at her as he cast her out. A different woman might have run, might have taken the small mercy of exile and disappeared. Imani had spent 27 years being told to disappear. She knew exactly how. She did not run. She stood on the cold street below the glass tower, and something in her that had been bent her whole life quietly, finally straightened. They had made her a weapon her entire life. Her family had sharpened her, aimed her, fired her at their enemies, and called it love. Fine. She was a weapon. She had simply never once in 27 years been pointed at the right target. That ended now, because the frame was too clean. Imani knew forged books when she smelled them. She'd been raised by the man who wrote this one. A forgery this perfect, delivered this fast, landing this precisely on the one day Kang's guard was down over her. That wasn't just her father covering his tracks. That was someone inside the fortress. Someone who wanted Kang Tae-min not just betrayed, but blind, isolated, alone. Someone was clearing the board, and the only person in Seoul who could see it was the cast-out traitor wife, freezing on the sidewalk with nothing left to lose. Imani looked up at the tower where the man she loved sat believing the worst of her. "All right," she said quietly, to no one. You want to know what I'm good for? Watch. She went to the one person who would open a door to her. Halmione. The old woman took one look at Imani on her private step and pulled her inside, past the guards, before anyone could stop her. My grandson, Halmione said, furious and grieving, is a brilliant fool. He believed them. I did not. Now tell me everything. So Imani told her. The Yoon money, the placement, the frame, and then, with Halmione's quiet resources and her own bookkeeper's mind, she pulled the last thread. The manifest that had damned her had been discovered by one man, Kang's own Lieutenant Baek, trusted, loyal, 30 years at his side. Baek had found the leak. Baek had brought it to Kang. Baek had stood at his shoulder and watched him cast out his wife. And when Imani traced Baek's accounts the way she'd traced her family's, there it was, buried 3 shells deep. Yoon money, the same well the Coles drank from. It fell into place all at once, and it was worse than she'd feared. The frame was never only about removing her. It was about the timing. Kang Tae-min had a sit-down tonight. A meeting brokered weeks ago that he could not skip without looking weak. With his wife exposed as a traitor, his house in chaos, his trust shattered, his most loyal man secretly steering him. Kang would walk into that meeting distracted, underguarded and alone, and the Yoon would be waiting. The frame wasn't the attack. The frame was the setup. They had spent Imani to blind him, and tonight they were going to kill him. Imani stood in Halmione's room with the proof in her hands, and perhaps 2 hours to reach a man who had ordered her out of his sight. There is no harder thing in the world than trying to save someone who has decided you are the danger. Imani could not simply walk into the fortress. She was the cast-out wife, the confirmed traitor. The guards had orders she could not call. Baek controlled the channels, and any warning that passed through him would vanish or be twisted into more proof of her treachery. Every road to Kang ran through the very people trying to kill him. Then we don't use the roads, Halmione said, already moving. 70 years of a Mafia family's cunning, lighting her sharp old eyes. You forget, child. I lived in that house before Baek was born. I know ways into it the maps do not. While the old woman worked her ancient contacts, Imani did the thing she did best. She built the case, cold, complete, undeniable. The Yoon money into the Coles, the Yoon money into Baek. The forged manifest's true origin, the timing of tonight's meeting. Everything a paranoid man needed to see the truth even through his own fear. Because she understood him now. Kang Tae-min would not be saved by a woman crying that she was innocent. He had heard 1,000 people lie to save themselves. He would only be saved by proof, cold and clean, and impossible to argue with. She would give him the one thing no one had ever bothered to give her, the benefit of the truth. The clock ran down. Across the city, unaware, the most dangerous man in Seoul, dressed for a meeting designed to kill him with a traitor at his shoulder, and the one person who could save him locked outside his walls. And Imani Cole, weapon and bookkeeper and scapegoat and wife, went to war for a man who had thrown her away. Because that was the difference between them and her, and it always had been. She reached the sit-down as the trap was closing. Halmione's forgotten passages got her past the perimeter. Her bookkeeper's memory of the schedule got her to the right room, and 27 years of moving through the world unseen got her through a door no one thought to watch, because no one ever watched Imani Cole. That had always been her family's mistake. Now it was the Yoons. She came through a side entrance into a private room where Kang Tae-min sat across from men who smiled too much, with Baek at his shoulder. Baek, whose hand was drifting, slow and casual, toward the phone that would signal the shooters outside. Don't move, Baek. The room turned. Kang Tae-min's face when he saw her did something complicated and terrible. You should not be here. Your lieutenant is Yoon's, Imani said, and she did not raise her voice, because she had learned that from him. She dropped the folder on the table. The manifest that framed me. He built the trail and delivered it. The money that bought my family bought him, 3 shells deeper. And this meeting tonight, with your guard cut and your house in chaos over me, it is the kill. He walked you into it. The shooters are already outside. Check his phone. Check it now. For one frozen second, no one moved. Then Baek lunged for the phone, and that was all the answer Kang Tae-min needed. What happened next happened fast, the way it always does when the wall comes down. But the shape of it was simple. The most dangerous man in Seoul, warned in the one heartbeat that mattered, was no longer a target walking blind into a room. He was a reckoning, and his enemies had made the fatal mistake of underestimating the wife they'd spent to blind him. who had just walked through their perfect trap and lit it up from the inside. They had forgotten the oldest rule of Imani Cole's whole life. Nobody watches the woman in the back until it is far too late. It unraveled fast after that. Conspiracies always do, once the one person holding the thread pulls. The Yoon strike collapsed into a rout. Their shooters taken, their moment lost, years of patient scheming undone in a single night because a bookkeeper in a borrowed coat had read the numbers no one thought she could. Baek did not see another dawn a free man, and the Yoon family, exposed as the hand behind it all, learned what it cost to move against Kang Tae-min and fail. Everything. But it was the Coles who fell hardest, and Imani made sure of that herself. She did not need her husband's men for it. She needed her own ledgers. Every one of Yoon money that had flowed into her family, every forged document, every fingerprint of the frame they had built. Imani had traced it, copied it, preserved it, and now she handed it, cold and complete, to the people who could end them. The Cole family did not go to war. They went to ruin. The status they had sold their own daughter to protect evaporated in a week. And Grace, beautiful, groomed, golden Grace, watched the future she'd been built for turn to ash, and understood far too late that the sister she'd helped throw away had been the only thing of real value the family ever had. They came to Imani at the end. Of course they did. Her mother, her father Grace, smaller than she had ever seen them, asking for mercy, for money, for the help she had always given. Imani looked at the people who had spent 27 years teaching her she was worth nothing. She did not scream. She did not gloat. She simply saw them clearly, the way the Don had once seen her. "You taught me my whole life that my worth was what I could do for you," she said quietly. "You were wrong about my worth, but you were right that I could do a great deal." A pause. "I just don't do it for you anymore." And she closed the door. Kang Tae-min came to her that night, not summoned her, came to her, to the small room in Halmione's wing where Imani had been staying, because she had not yet decided whether she would stay at all. He stood in the doorway, the most dangerous man in Seoul, and for the first time since she had known him, he did not seem to know what to do with his hands. "I put you out in the cold," he said. "I believed them. I looked at the one person who ever loved me without wanting anything, and I chose to believe she was exactly like everyone else." His voice was raw. "You saved my life tonight. After I did that, you walked through my enemy's trap to save a man who threw you away at dawn." "Yes," Imani said. "I did. Why?" She was quiet a moment. "Because I know what it costs to be thrown away. And I decided a long time ago that I would rather die being the kind of person who opens the door in the rain than live being the kind who lets a man bleed out because it's safer." She met his eyes. "You are not the only one who has been betrayed by everyone who was supposed to love them, Tae-min. I just made a different choice about what it turned me into." Something broke in his face. The last of the wall, 20 years of it, coming down all at once. "It was never the debt," he said. "It was never gratitude, and it was never pity, and God help me, it was never because you were convenient. From the first night in the rain, when I woke in a world where someone had chosen to save me for nothing, it was you. It has only ever been you. And I nearly threw away the only real thing I have ever had, because loving it frightened me more than any enemy ever could." "Yes," Imani said again, softer. "You did." "I'm going to say something," Imani said, "and I need you to hear all of it. Say it. I love you. I think I have since the night you told a ballroom full of people I was the most valuable woman in it, and meant it." She saw the hope leap in his eyes and held up a hand. "And that is exactly why I will not do this if the price is being someone you doubt the moment it's convenient. I spent 27 years earning love that could be taken away the second I stopped being youthful. I will not spend the rest of my life earning yours." "Imani, I'm not finished." Her voice was steady, certain, entirely her own. "You don't get to keep me because you saved me, and I don't stay because you did. We are not each other's rescue. I clawed my own way out of that trap tonight, out of that family, out of 27 years of believing what they told me I was. Nobody rescued me, Tae-min. I did that. A breath. So if I stay, I don't stay as your grateful wife, or your debt, or the girl you plucked out of a kitchen. I stay as your equal, your partner. The person who runs your world beside you, who tells you when you're a brilliant fool, and who you never ever put out in the cold again." He crossed the room. "On my life," he said, "as my equal, as the smartest, bravest, most impossible woman in Seoul." He took her hands, the flour-dusted hands that had saved him twice, and held them like the treasure they were. "Stay, not because you have to, Because I am asking you, knowing I don't deserve it, and hoping you choose me anyway. Imani Cole, who had spent her whole life being chosen last, looked at the most dangerous man in the city, choosing her first, and this time chose herself and him in the same breath. All right, she said, as equals. They did not have a second wedding in the end. Imani said she'd had quite enough of standing at altars to be looked at. Instead, she simply moved through the doors of that glass fortress as what she had become, not a guest, not a prize, not a scapegoat borrowed for a night, the mistress of the house, the mind behind its business. The one person the most feared man in Seoul trusted with everything, walking its halls with her head high and in clothes that fit the woman she had always been underneath the apron. The men who had stared now stood when she entered. Halmione beamed at every meal, and Kang Tae-min, cold, dangerous, unreachable Kang Tae-min, had learned to laugh quietly in a house that had not heard laughter in 20 years. Sometimes in the early morning, Imani still baked, not because anyone made her, because she loved it, and because in her own warm kitchen, in her own home, with the door wide open, she could finally do the thing she loved and let the whole world see the hands that did it. There is a lie the world tells about the women it decides not to look at, that their worth is their waistline, or their usefulness, or how small and quiet and grateful they can make themselves. It seats them in the back, it hides them in the kitchen, it calls the pretty one the treasure, and the useful one the help. And it never once imagines that the woman it overlooked might be the most valuable person in the room. Imani Cole spent 27 years being the wrong daughter. And in the end, the most dangerous man in that city walked past every golden thing the world told him to want, and chose the one they had hidden in the kitchen. Because he was the only one who ever bothered to look, and what he found there was worth more than all of it. Your worth was never your dress size. It was never what you could do for the people who refused to love you. It was always only you. If Imani's story found you tonight, if you have ever been the one in the back, the one they hide, the one who does the work while someone else takes the credit, then you already know what to do, like this, and stay. Because the next one is already waiting. Another dangerous man, another woman the world underestimated, and another family about to learn exactly what they threw away.